to the webinar. I think we'll go around. What we'll do is we'll go around the room here and identify who's on this side, and then we'll go down institution by institution to make sure that we've at least got a representative from each institution here. So I'm Tom Keaton from the Coordinating Board.
And Lee Eklund, also from the Coordinating Board in Strategic Planning and Funding.
And David Young from the Coordinating Board, Strategic Planning and Funding.
Roland Moore from the Coordinating Board, Program Director.
Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down institutions and just, if we can get one name as a context there. I understand there's probably several of you in the rooms there, but if we can just get one name so we have it for the record. So UT Southwestern.
This is Angelica Hill.
Hi, Angelica.
Hi there.
UTMB, Galveston.
Celia Bailey Ochoa.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Health Center Houston.
Scott Barnett.
Scott. Yale Science Center San Antonio. T Health Science Center San Antonio. D. Anderson. I'm sorry. Oh, Hugh Ferguson. Hi, Hugh. Utah Science Center Tyler. Science Center Tyler. Anybody there? A&M System Health Science Center.
No, I wasn't.
Texas A&M System Health Science Center.
This is Joseph Duran. I'm here from the A&M System.
Anybody here from the Health Science Center specifically? All right, thanks, Joseph. UNT Health Science Center. Texas Health Science Center.
This is Harkey.
I knew your Penny. Texas Health Science Center, El Paso. Anyone from TTU El Paso?
Lisa Badillo and Jessica Fisher.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we get go.
And let's just ask, is there anyone else from representing systems or other institutions?
Joseph Duran said he was there. Is there anyone else?
You got Daniel Harper with Texas State Systems.
And this is Martha Brown. I'm listening.
Great.
Lillian with UNT Systems.
Wes Duncan, MD Anderson.
Lauren here with UTMB.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, getting started here, I think we're going to let Julie off with some opening comments, and then we'll get after it.
Okay. Again, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I assume you all received the models in the mail. This is the second session that we're having. We met with the GAIs this morning to discuss the models that we provided to them. And I made a general comment at the beginning of that meeting. I want to make it here as well. And that's that although we tried in the report to provide or to the message that this report is not intended to be used in terms of funding proposal. We still were hearing concerns on the part of the institutions about the potential fiscal impact on the model, and we just wanted to let you know that we are going to add some additional text to the report, especially the executive summary section, which comes, of course, at the front, about the fact that the concerns on the part of the institutions that the model shouldn't be used as a basis for reducing state funding, and to support the fact that the coordinating board and our commissioner and then our board did adopt formula funding proposals, and that we fully support those proposals and not a change that might be the result of this that might result from from this report. So we wanted to be sure to let you know that we hear your voices in terms of that. We went back through the report. I know there were several places we tried to say that, but I think probably could have been a little more front and center, so we are going to make sure that language is in there, because that was a concern that was expressed by the stakeholder committees at the time and when we received comments. Beyond that, we will open it up to additional comments that weren't related to the models at the end of the session, but we'd like to right now I'd like to turn it over to Tom, and he will provide some background information on the models which were provided to you in the mail out. And feel free to break in at any point in time and ask questions. If we do have a problem with background noise, we will have to mute you. I worked out okay in the last session. Just be conscious of that. Try not to put us on hold. But feel free to jump in, and then after each of the models, we'll take some time to make sure that all of your questions are answered. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to Tom.
Okay, thanks, Julie. We did get all of your comments, and as I hope you all know, we do listen, and we do give them every attention that we can, especially when it's one of those items that we can actually look at. One of the things, there were some comments on the clinical space. In terms of clinical space, we tried to run several different methodologies for doing that. At the end of the day, there are some data limitations. I know one of the comments was to use instructional FTE that are at least 5% times a coefficient to predict space. And we ran those numbers. We even ran them, excuse me, in regards to headcount. But we had institutions with values of 1. So that negated the ability to use that. We tried looking at to model clinical space, we tried to look at the number of clinical FTE or direct patient care or different mutations. But we all came back to there was one institution or another that had a low value and that would have resulted in very little space. So you won't see any changes to the clinical space between this value, or between previous models and this. We did get some discussion in terms of using research FTE. That's something that was addressed, that had been brought up when we with stakeholders throughout the process, and we actually ran the numbers. Well, and we have some different permutations, as you can see on screen, if looking at it. Looked at it in terms of as presented previously, which is all FTE times 250 as that second measure for research space. And we also used it, looked at it at 250 square feet per research faculty FTE. We decided to look at it another way, which was to look at what the average was between all and give a 30% area for growth in research. Well, when we pull all those numbers down and we see that, it comes up to 2,260 square feet per research faculty FTE, which is the mean plus 30%. So they're the two very real distinct differences between the models that you see. Now, in office space, there is an update, and we'll send that out. Many thanks to Penny Harkey. In one of the background spreadsheets, about 4 deep, there was a 10 in one place and a 0.1 and a 0.2 in the ratio. We've corrected that, and when I go over the comparison, those are the corrected values. And thanks to Penny for taking a close look at that. We do appreciate that. But in terms of the office space, in all of them, we use the ratios from the LAR for all with a 5 FTE cap. An average of all is the minimum. Now we used the ungrouped data to create what the average ratio was. We didn't put the cap in until on the backside once that was all determined. So any questions thus far on that? Okay. In comparison to the models, you can see these. I'll try to shrink it down a little bit to make it a little bit easier to see. It's a little challenging sometimes. Made no adjustment to the multi-campus, no change to the multi-campus adjustment. and we hadn't previously. And you see that in comparison, the surplus and deficit, all institutions in all three scenarios continue to show a deficit. For those of you that weren't directly involved in it, teaching space, we adjusted all of the coefficients 10%. We looked at different methods to simplify that, but with the diversity in the program areas and the differing needs, we felt an adjustment to the coefficients was appropriate. Research space is, the base year is adjusted back to 2013. It was at 1991. So that resulted in us modifying the other side of the ratio and the square footage, which from 9,000 to 4,150, which seems large, but by adjusting that base year, it really changes the value of each of those dollars because the base year adjustment going back to 91 was so large, was so high. Office space was the point of discussion, and I'll go over that in more detail in a second. Medical space, there's no change to that. The predicted is the actual. One comment we did get is that the data are not verifiable. We can't go out and verify that a clinical square foot is indeed a clinical square foot. Currently, the provisions of the Texas Education Code exempt health-related institutions from participating in the facilities audit. If that were to change, certainly we would plug them into the audit schedule and we would go out and verify. But that's not something that we are pushing for an agenda item, but I did want to address that comment as it was sent and well received. So look at that, when we look at this, you'll see that between the models, there's no difference in the office square feet. That's where put that out. So we'll go ahead and look at proposal 1, which is essentially what's in the report. See the LAR numbers here, and the ratios with the cap at 5. The ratio was created, the average created 3.69. That will vary from what you see. Your current has 3.74. So there was a minor change to that, and of course the adjustments are made here. So as you see, for instance, at Texas A&M System Health Science Center, their ratio per the LAR is 2.7. However, the average is the minimum at 3.69. Conversely, you look up here at Galveston, their ratio is actually 18.5. With the cap in place, that's 5. That is actually because the way that they're calculated in the past, and then several others being part of another institutions. That's area 1. So when we go to office space, you can see that the adjustment per the report in our briefings, $950 per adjusted million to 2013. As I said in the research space, adjusting it to 2013 required us to modify that to otherwise the amount of square footage would have been difficult to support. And then if indeed the amount from the 170-190 per FTE exceeds that amount predicted in the E&G expenditures, then the average of the two values is used. And you can see that there. In version 2, with DE, you'll see in this case, the values are the same here. And in version 3, they'll be the same. If we go back to version 1 in terms of research space, okay, this is at 250 square feet per FTE faculty. Excuse me. And then proposal 2 for research space, you'll see that's the 2,260 square feet per research faculty. And proposal 3 is 250 square feet per research FTE. And those are the main differences, and I open it up to questions.
difference in the first model was the correction that was made for the slight error.
Right,
But otherwise, that
right.
is what is in the report, and we
Yes.
will, make
And
that change.
they were incredibly minor,
It was just affected it in a small way, but.
very, very small. But we are going to
Feedback.
correct it. Yeah, absolutely appreciate the feedback.
And then, so are there comments about the second two proposals, in terms of the we got and how we looked at them and incorporated those suggestions?
Julie and Tom, this is James Drake from UT Southwestern.
Mm-hmm. Hi, James.
Several institutions don't change at all no matter what values you're using. If you look under research predicted for UT Southwestern and for MD Anderson, we're the same all the way through. Whether you're doing proposal 1, proposal 2, or proposal 3, I'm not sure how that's possible.
Well, the way it's possible is if you go, and I've got it up on the screen now,
Okay.
if the 4050 per million,
Okay, it's either or, right?
it's either or. So that one's higher, and those values exceed that, it wouldn't change.
Okay, I was just curious. I wanted to make sure that we were still doing it the way we did last time, where you picked the highest of the two values.
That's correct, and thanks for the question.
All right, thank you.
Tom, this is Penny. These are just comments. They're not really questions. But option 2, as I just alluded to, institution, the value for option 2 is the FTE, based on the faculty FTE, with the exception of Southwestern and MD Anderson. So it changes for everybody except those two institutions. And on the option 3, it does is there's not, that FTE calculation really doesn't come into play anymore because every institution's research expenditures are higher than their FTE calculation.
Yes.
So,
But we had received those comments.
right.
And
So I just wanted to make a comment for the group.
It would always be that way.
No, there's no telling what would.
Right. So I think that's why you wanted to, because we received the comment, you wanted to share that.
Right, absolutely,
approach.
exactly. We received the comment, and we want to do our due diligence to make sure that all concerns were addressed to the greatest point we could.
This is Celia from Galveston. Apologize if I'm going back a bit, but I might have missed when this change happened. So we had done a survey to come up with the faculty to staff ratio. We had down the road of doing a survey to collect the information as opposed to looking at the LR ratios. And I just kind of want to remember, we ended up not going in that direction.
I'm sure it was the third meeting, it was brought up that the model doesn't, the curl's pretty good, and that's what we hit, so why, are we changing it? And it was, my understanding of the group is that it was, and indeed was a fairly accurate representation as we could see it. So we chose not to do that, with the exception of using values for everybody. And we received an email comment regarding a cap, and a cap did make sense.
Okay, I had been asked that question, and I just wanted to make sure we just covered that.
Those results were shared with everyone,
They
and
were.
everyone had a chance in that third meeting to see what it looked
Right,
like.
the results were in
versus the
before that.
Yeah.
Now, to be honest, the numbers were not astronomically different, 0.1 and 0.2.
Okay.
They varied slightly, and but again, it was my interpretation from the comments from the group that the method's pretty good. And to coin a phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And is that everyone else's sense from that meeting in terms of looking at that? Okay, just to make sure we didn't have anyone who felt like that wasn't this is a resulting conclusion at the end of that meeting in terms of how to approach that. Okay. Any other, especially model related at this point? Well, I think open it up if there are any general questions to comments that were submitted or the model. We're happy to listen to any of those general comments or questions.
To go back to one point that, and I know Julie touched on before, we've done the funding potential redistributions. Yes. These are, they're projections. We don't know. And the board's position through the Formula Advisory Committee recommendation is for an increase, and that stands. These numbers that you see don't consider that part of it. But at your request, you want to see what the potentialities were for funding distribution. So we presented it. So these are not our recommendations for funding levels.
Right.
They are simply, approximations based on existing levels of funding and inserting the changes with the best available data we have to date into that to show a T1, T2, not necessarily a perfect T1 comparison. And we can talk about the path forward and,
Tom,
I have a question. This is Tomas Guajardo with UT System.
Sure.
Similar to what I asked in the earlier version, the academics, I want to ask a question about office space having a larger share of the pie of the particular square feet, while teaching and research are diminishing. And I don't know if you would mind elaborating on the rationale behind that. And again, unintended consequence, but that's really what's happening in the outcome under all three scenarios. I think somebody did the math for me. Office is almost close to 40%, I think 37% of the square feet.
Address that. Each of these, and as I said before, Tomas, each of these are discretely studied. When we look at teaching space, we look at teaching space. When we research, we look at research. When we look at office, we look at office. We look at clinical, we look at clinical. The end of that is a summary representation. Now, we've attempted to balance this to what we've seen as changes in the environment as teaching space has gone up per full-time student equivalent, or in this case, per count student, how office space has changed. We look at those per faculty member, and we look at those discretely. There's no, we are going to put more square footage over here, more square footage over there, because that implies that there's a start point by which you're going to allocate those across the 5 areas. That's not it at all. And the modifications, while they come out that way, as I said earlier, that's reflective of what's happening in the environment.
Well, I'm looking at the fall 2015 model. Total predicted square for research was 8.2 million. Now it's down to between 6.5 and 7 in space. The actuals in the fall were 6.6, and in all three scenarios have it over 3 million. Very intuitive.
And I think, inherent in there is the assumption that the existing is correct, and that's a good benchmark to start from.
Office space, we weren't seeing projections really far beyond the actual. It was actually tracking fairly. Do I remember that correctly?
And that's why
in terms of when you modeled it and looked at that data, that it was tracking pretty closely in terms of what was being predicted and used.
So I'm not disputing the math. I'm simply saying that, this is a reflection of what we've seen in the environment at the institutions and how things have changed.
And I think the library came up in the last meeting as well, and some of those we did have, I think, rich discussions with the stakeholder group about how libraries are being used, and that, yes, we don't have the book storage, but we've moved into meeting space and students, needing computer terminals to do their work, or meeting maybe related to hybrid or online courses. So we did have that discussion, but I seem to remember that was modeling in a fairly similar way. And Tom, I want to go back just as this is raised. What are we seeing in terms of percentages? I just want to make sure. Thank you. Let me get that. Thank you. Oh, this is something we've just prepared. Is that okay? That Tom? Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you. And again, this was not it wasn't based on trying to shift for mission. It was really based on looking at how space was used, actual, and thinking predicted, and obviously wasn't. Correct me if I'm wrong. Unlike with teaching and research, where we felt it's especially important to build in that predicted space so that institutions have room to grow. Was that built in terms of the office? And okay, so that same amount was built in the 30%. Well, yeah,
we didn't go base plus on.
You didn't go on that.
They wanted it. Now the research space with that larger amount, the number escapes me right now.
Okay.
2260 number, that is a base plus.
That's a plus. Okay. I just want to ask, are there comments about that base plus? Any concerns about that? That should have looked at a different way? I want to put that out there just specifically for this issue. Again, because this office space specifically that we're looking at here. No comment there or thoughts on more than just it's modeling it a little bit differently in terms of mission.
I'm asking just about the research, the 2260, or are you asking something about office?
I'm asking about the office, and it came up with library, and it's been modeled in the same way, Tom, correct? The board, in terms of the office space, you just talked about building the additional.
No.
Okay, that's the part where I think I misunderstood.
The only change to this is using the LAR, the actual reported LAR numbers for everybody.
Right.
Which is the minimum cap. With a cap 5. Highest should be 5.
I misunderstood. Thank you. And it's what I thought I was saying initially, Tom.
Okay.
I misunderstood your second comment. So it is not building in the way that it is, and I think I was trying to make the case for teaching and research. There's that additional build-in for future growth, and it's not built in the same way. Is that correct?
Right.
For office and library.
Correct.
That's what I thought. Yes.
Because
Thank
the
you.
number has and is predicting closely to how the institutions have been responding to the environment.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's what I thought.
And I think it's important to note that in the beginning, we had some fundamental questions, and one of them was how are institutions are institutions responding to change in the environment? And for the you that were on the stakeholder group, we showed a graph that shows they almost immediate and proportionate to the change. For instance, if number of students went up 4%, teaching space went up 4%. So we see that institutions are indeed responding to changes in the environment in an immediate and proportional manner. So that lends credibility to the idea that there is a use for the actual square footage. Now, if they didn't vary, if students went up and the amount of square footage maybe went down or changed, it would tell us that we'd have to look in a different way. But in these cases, we've seen that there is a proportional action there. So the institutional response to changes in the environment is proportional and correct. And you guys are going to make the decision that you need to make to provide the best service and the best environment for your students. No doubt it. That's never a question. So we leverage that, and we leverage your input, and part of that is why we're here today. When we sent out for third-party review, there weren't a lot of direct comments to health-related, only that we used a separate model, which was somewhat unique. Okay. But leveraging some of the ideas around the others is that there are some differences between types of institutions. That's part of the difficulty we came into in trying to do the clinical space. With such a few number of institutions, unless each institution had its own model, or we had 3 or 4 different models within this, it's really not a feasible inspection.
I think we had comments from health-related institutions that we should have stratification by.
I did not read any.
I don't
from
recall
health-related
receiving any
regarding
institutions regarding that. I think that comment was directed more at, in terms of the review and what we heard back more at the general academic institutions, where we did provide some models that certified. Yes. Okay. Any other either general questions or concerns or comments? Any areas that are unclear where additional documentation would be helpful? I believe most of the folks probably who are participating on this call, because all of the institutions were invited to join the stakeholder group, that most of you have been provided with the background files and had the opportunity to see those.
From this point, folks, and if we have questions after I get done, feel free to ask them then. We will be distributing in the next day, no later than tomorrow, a survey, and we'd like to get one response per institution as to a preference. You'll get a preference 1 and a preference 2. We'll look at those. If we see a clear from your feedback that you prefer one or the other, that will be it, and we'll
take that
inform the process.
Right, to help that inform the process, correct.
And then if there isn't a clear preference, then we'll narrow it based on the top 2 and send the survey back out. Again, the results of your survey will be shared with our board members, our board chair and committee chair, who have been authorized by the board to approve the report. And certainly, as always, your input and feedback is not only welcome, but really essential to making any of this stuff work. Questions, comments?
Tom, this is Joseph Duran. Quick question, will the academic survey look the same, pick a preference 1 or 2 and 2?
Yes.
Identical.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it'll have different
there's
choices.
more models, right, but it'll just be the first preference and the second.
Yes.
That's the way they both have been
Thank you.
developed, yeah.
Questions, comments, or concerns?
I have a quick question. The recordings of these webinars for folks who weren't able to be here, are you going to send those out, or?
We will include them in the package we send with the survey and the latest model runs.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, and I think we'll try to get in touch with, if we had folks who weren't present with us today, we'll try to reach out to them too and just let them know that this is available, just to make sure someone isn't missing all of the emails. So we'll try to make a personal connection in cases where we didn't have anyone either from the system or the institution presented. We understand that, it was a fairly short turnaround time. We're trying to move forward as quickly as we can because we wanted to report in, but we thought it was very important that we have time to explain the models and give institutions a chance to provide their thoughts.
If there are any other questions or concerns, I appreciate you dialing in, tuning in, however you want to put it.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful day, and you'll hear from us.
Yeah, thank you. And I did want to say, if someone would like to contact me, if you have any additional questions or comments, please feel free to do so. And if you have anything technical related as you're reviewing these models, if a question comes up about how something works, please do feel free to contact Tom. I know some of you are just starting to understand how all this fits together, sitting in on the webinars. So please do take the time if you're confused about how something works or how something was done. Please do feel free to contact us. Thanks very much.
Have a good day.